Hey and welcome! Today on the Woodgrafter I'm going to talk to you about why I've decided to sell my MFT tables and make something different. You want to understand why? Stick around! Hey and welcome back to the Woodgrafter. I'm Andy Guile, and if you're new here, welcome on board. Our mission is to inspire, educate and support you in your journey to becoming a better woodworker. We do that through a whole series of video content. Here on the YouTube channel we do tool tips, we do tool reviews, we do quick turnaround projects. We get together and have a jolly old chat. We also have a website, www.thewoodgrafter.com, and over there you can find project plans, you can find blogs. There's a vibrant community of people talking about our passion of woodworking, and there's deep dirty project builds over there, back-to-back series that's easy to consume and follow along if you decide to build something. So if you're not a subscriber, subscribe now, whiz over to the website and grab yourself a free membership. With that said, let's talk about MFTs. If you followed the channel for a while, you know over the last 14 months or so I've been slowly building up a woodworking business. We started off in this single car garage, and all these walls when we started were all just bare concrete, had all sorts of junk piled up at the back, and over the months we've slowly turned it into a nice production environment, and we've turned out some pretty good projects. At the heart of every project build has been my MFTs. Now when I first started I had a single MFT with all the Festool accessories on it, and over time I've moved away from the Festool accessories in favour of a benchdogs.co.uk system, and you can see that video series here and why I did that. And I also added a second MFT, and that's really got me by as I've been building the projects. The problem is I don't just want to get by. I demand a level of accuracy in my work, and because of that level of accuracy I often want to introduce hand tools and use hand tools to finesse the project, and that's where the MFT starts to fall down. Now heads up, this video is not going to be about bashing Festool or bashing the MFT. It's designed to be a highly accurate system predominantly aimed at large sheet type materials. It's designed to be highly portable, and it's designed to be part of a system with Festool tools, and for that it's absolutely perfect. And when I go onto site, absolutely this is the thing I would want to take with me. Now because my business is moving more to the educational side, and furniture builds happen to be built inside the project, and it's not moving towards those on-site projects, I don't need that functionality. So it got me thinking and second guessing, is this the right solution for me? And the simple answer is no, it's not. So I want to walk you through the key points as to why I'm making the decision to sell these and build something different. Let's start. Now the first and most obvious thing is the working length. A single MFT is going to give you a working surface of 1100 millimeters by round about 710 millimeters. The stock I tend to get into the shop is nearly 3 meters long, and it tends to be rough cut stock, so I need to be able to lie that on a flat surface, examine the stock and then break it down for the components inside our projects. So a single MFT is just not long enough, which is why I added the second MFT. Now when you think that these things are around about £500 each, that's a lot of investment just to get a longer working surface. So the first challenge I have, even with two MFTs, the overall length is still short by about a metre. So I want to be able to address that. Now I also have the CMS, and I use a CMS as that extension for those products, but the CMS is bulky and it's hard to move around unless I disassemble it, then move it, then reassemble it. And I don't want that. I want the ability to quickly reposition things. So a combination of changing this to be a reasonable length and updating the CMS is going to give me that overall length in the workshop. So when I'm talking about the MFT, I'm not just talking about selling and changing the MFT tables. I'm talking about all the MFT related solutions, such as the table, such as the CMS, and such as the Kapex. The second problem is width. When I'm using the MFT, I'm typically using a track saw to cross cut. Now to complete the cut, the track saw's got to go towards that sort of position on the table. and that now gives me a gap at the back of the table, and that gap is round about 150 millimeters wide. And what I find is things fall down the back of that. Yes, I have the beautiful box that we built some time ago that sits at the back, but it can easily fall off, and often does fall down that gap. So that frustrates me. And also, that's wasted space, and then in a small shop, wasted space is my enemy. So I want to use that backspace more effectively than the MFT allows. Now the other challenge I have is where to put the TS55 when I've made the cut. So I've made the cut, and at that point I want to be able to remove this material to go on to the next stage of the project. If I'm working on a long piece of stock, I've nowhere to put this. So what happens is I tend to lift it up and rest it on the Kapex in that sort of way. Now that makes it very vulnerable to being knocked on the floor, and it has happened a few times. And it also means I've got a cable and an air hose across the workshop floor, which is a tripping hazard, and very often, again, knocks that off. So I also want to be able to make use of that space at the back. So when I've finished a cut, I've got somewhere to rest that that's out of the way of the cutting surface. At the moment, if I do that, it tips into that 150 millimeter gap, and again, that makes me nervous. Now I've got the same problem with things like the dominoes, and I've got the same problem with things like the sander, any of the power tools that I use. Once I've done the operation, I want to store this somewhere, and there's nowhere to store it in the current configuration. So once again, they end up on the Kapex or they end up on the CMS. Same problem, very vulnerable to being knocked off, and both these tools have been knocked off a few times onto the workshop floor, and I've always got the problem of hoses. Now if you think about the Polk bench design, it has a really nice tool shelf under here, and what he tends to do is I finish the cut, I can just bang this under here and rest it out of the way. That's a really neat feature, and it's something I would really like to have in the workshop. Now there's no easy way of doing that on the MFT. So my first reason is very much about the working area and maximising the working area, and the second reason is about tool storage. There's nowhere to store these things on the MFT when you're using them. Now the big problem that everybody will recognise who's got an MFT is the stability of the MFT, and look at that, look how much movement, and I'm not spilling my tea, and I'm not doing an awful lot there, I'm just wagging that back in two, and you can see the challenge there. Now where that stability becomes a problem for me is when I'm looking to edge plane a piece of material. And what happens is, as you can see, as I plane, the bench moves. See that? So although I can do it, this bench is moving all the time, and therefore much of my energy is used in actually moving the bench and not planing the stock. Now although that doesn't seem like a big problem, if you're doing a lot of planing it's exhausting and it does tire you out. But that rock and always pushing back against your plane as this returns to its stable state actually affects the surface, and it can start to give you small ridges across this, and then because you're fighting that bench, it can also alter your accuracy in terms of squareness on this stock. So for planing purposes, that wobble is just not acceptable. Now when you're working on the edge or the end of the board, you're relying on this aluminium extrusion here to clamp your board in place in the way I just did with this one. And if you come closely, what that means is the board's only referencing on a rather narrow piece of aluminium, and all this top piece here you're actually working on is unsupported. Now this is a nice thick piece of cherry, and not an unusual product in my shop, 25mm thick, and if I can try and hold the table steady, you can see that even at 25mm that board flexes, and the longer the board of course, the more that problem is exacerbated. So although I can clamp and work on the edge and the end for precision work, that amount of flex in the board is also not something that's acceptable. Now if you were working on the end of the board and you were raising this board up so you could do something like dovetail work or even just tuning dovetails, you can see that pivots on that aluminium extrusion, and that's too much movement to give the accuracy of the joinery on your dovetails. Now again, I'm not knocking the MFT here, I'm just explaining the drawbacks that I have. And you can see this clamping here is not really suitable for what I want it to achieve because it's not firm enough. So that movement of the stock, that movement of the side stock, and that stability of the MFT are all challenges to me in my workflow. Now the next challenge is actually the multi-use of this T-track here, and Festool use this for an awful lot on the MFT. Yes, we use it to put our clamps in, but Festool also use it to put this joining bar here that connects the two tables together. And just here, I'm not sure if you can see it, there's a stop that's used for the accessory kit to make sure that your rail always sits square. So when I come to put my clamps in, they can only slide that far down, and similarly this way, they only slide that far down to that stop. Now yes, you can take these stops out, and that's exactly what I've done on that table, but you can see that's a pain. Now, it sounds very, very small, but workflow for me is very, very important. And very often you're focusing on the accuracy of a joint or the finish you want on a particular piece of stock. And you might be thinking, right, I'm just going to clamp this piece of stock in here. And you're bringing your clamp in only to find that you've got this thing here that gets in your way. And then you stop and you reorientate yourself. And that's just enough to take you out of that zone that you tend to get in when you're really focusing on the joint. Very, very small thing, but it is there. Now the final thing is the use of the space. I'm talking about the space underneath the bench, and you can see there's a lot of open space underneath here, and that's understandable because when you're on the site you can bang your toolboxes underneath there, they're out of the way, but in the workshop it's dead space again, and like anywhere you've got space you just tend to throw things inside it. So I want to be able to make better use of the space underneath those benches. Now, although I did buy these for portability, once you've actually got these clamped together, they're actually pretty heavy. So to actually drag them around the workshop isn't really a good idea. And I don't really need that portability, but that's where I start to look at the other components in the workshop. Now the CMS is a great table, and I love the interchangeability of these modules and the fact that I can use my TS55 in here and I've got a table saw. I can use my router in here and I've got a router table. If I wanted to, I could put the sander module in here and have a sanding machine. It's fantastic and gives me huge versatility. But I've got a similar problem. Once again, this isn't really that stable. And the working area is not that big, so I'm always finding myself dragging this out. Now because I have the CMS and I have the extension table here at the back, that puts strains on this joint and it goes out of calibration. So I've got a similar challenge on this as the MFT, that portability of the system once it's erected, and the stability in use and the overall area I can use. And once again, huge amounts of space underneath that. There is actually dead space in the small workshop. So I have a consistent challenge with the MFT type tables, and although it's less of an issue on the Kapex, I still have that stability problem, and I'm forever adding the extensions on this to give me that wider working area. So if I look at the MFT style setup I've got in the workshop and say what are the problems, I can break that down to a few key points. So the first point has got to be stability. That's my biggest issue with the table. There's just too much play in any of the tables, be it the Kapex table, be it the CMS, be it the MFT tables. There's just too much flex in use. Now the second point is working area. Now in all of these tables I don't have quite enough working area, and I can fix that by adding more CMSs and more extension tables, but the cost goes up every time that I do that. And I always find myself trying to drag these around the workshop because I've not got that flexibility that I need. And when you drag these around the workshop, because of the weight, all these connection bars on all the devices tend to flex, and that knocks your accuracy out. The third point for me is dead space. Dead space at the back and dead space underneath the tables. Now they've got to be in this configuration to allow them to work. The space at the back of the Kapex against this wall here for the back of the Kapex, the space around the CMS for the fences, and the space at the back here to allow me to finish the cut on the TS55 is all dead space behind the table. And the big problem with dead space, of course, is things fall down inside it. The fourth area is I've nowhere to actually put the tools when I'm using them. If I've got this covered in work, then there's nowhere to put the tools during the exercise. And although I've never had it, I think I miss the ability to store things under this area. And the fifth area is the clamping. And we saw very, very clearly when I want to work on the edge or the end grain of the table, there's too much flex in the table and there's too much flex in the board, even when I'm using something like a 25mm thick piece of cherry. Now they're the 5 key reasons why I'm going to move away from MFTs in the workshop. And if you're starting off where I was 14 months ago and you're thinking of doing the same thing, it's just worth knowing that and gaining from my experience. I don't regret any of this because this got me started, but the investment in the outlay up front was pretty high and I wish I'd built my own to begin with. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to share with you why I'm about to make that decision to scrap the MFT style configuration of my workshop and go for purpose-built things. I will go through some of the design features and the concepts here on the YouTube channel, but the main project build and the plans are going to be over on the website. So if you're not a member, rush over there now and grab yourself a free membership, www.thewoodgrafter.com. That's it. That's all I wanted to talk about. I hope you found this useful. If you're using the MFT, let me know what you think. If you've looked through it and discarded it, again, let me know what you think in the comments so we can all learn from our collective experience. And I'll see you next time.